Hello and welcome to Opening Doors. I'm Rachel Dalinka, your host, and today I'm excited to be speaking with Judge Rea Boylan of Bucks County.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. You're very welcome. I had the pleasure of hearing Judge Boylan speak at the Bucks County Reentry Coalition meeting and was very inspired by the work that she did starting in 2010 with Recovery Court, formerly known as Drug Court, and Wellness Court, formerly known as Mental Health Court. And I knew that these courts, which provide an alternative to incarceration, treatment, is the way that things should be moving in our country. And so I wanted to get more information about that and hear about the great successes.
I think the entire country has come to the recognition that the way to prepare people to live in the community drug-free, making good choices, is to provide support while they're doing that in the community. You don't learn how to make those choices while locked behind bars. Certainly there are efforts that can be made with people who are in institutions, but it's very different to be in the community, confronted with choices, confronted with challenges in the community. And that's why I think that's the power of treatment courts.
Absolutely. So that the person is learning how to live without drugs and learning how to manage their lives.
Exactly. And there so many needs that an individual has to be reincorporated in the community, not only treatment needs, but we find people have health needs. We screen for those kinds of things, challenges with respect to their family members, figuring out a way to reintegrate themselves in a family, reposition themselves as a parent in a family. And the power of these courts is that all members of our systems come together to collaborate to figure out how to best meet people's needs and prepare them.
So tell me a little bit about the different members of the system.
Well, our core team is a representative from the district attorney's office, an advocate for those participants who are in the court. We also have a liaison for both mental health treatment and drug and alcohol treatment, a law enforcement member on the team. We work collaboratively with mental health and drug and alcohol providers in the community, but we also work with other organizations such as Sync Recovery. And Sync Recovery on a regular basis provides activities for our participants in the community. They just recently did zip lines and climbing together in the community. We partner with workforce development. We use the CareerLink bus when it comes to the courthouse on a monthly basis for our participants. We provide nutrition counseling.
Oh,
we
wow.
provide we work with partners in the community to provide financial counseling. So we really try to look at each person individually and look at their needs and figure out how we can collaborate with others in the community. In our mental health courts, we've, for instance, provided guitar lessons for someone. We found a resource to do that because that was an interest. If someone has an interest in art, we've linked them up with, say, the Michener Museum to do art classes. So we try to look at the strengths and the needs of each individual and address them.
It's amazing. It really is amazing because then that individual has those connections going forward. Once they've been able to complete the program, they're connected to people in their community.
And I think that's really important. People need purpose and connection.
Absolutely. Right. And Sync Recovery is an amazing organization run by Laura Waite, an amazing group.
It is an amazing group. And, you know, as I say to people who, you know, have long-term used drugs and alcohol, you can't just sit in your room and sort of white knuckle it your way to long-term recovery. Your life has to be full and rich, and there has to be something to replace that. And that's why I think Sync Recovery is so powerful, that people come to the recognition, well, you can have a good time. You can, do things and connect with other people without being under the influence of a drug.
Absolutely. And for listeners, Sync Recovery is a group that fosters yoga classes, hiking, all kinds of sort of outdoors activity, and
also arts. They do, pottery and all kinds of things. So it's quite wonderful.
And it's a community of people in recovery, and again, helping that person in recovery connect with other people so that they have a community.
I also think making connections with people based on your interests, based on your strengths is important. And I think, we mentioned before you started, we're working on a mentorship program.
Yes.
Where we hope to connect people with other people in the community based on their interests, people who perhaps have experience in the field or interests they have, to be able to kind of coach the person through, this is the way to handle this situation. In a kind of different way than we certainly use peer specialists in all of our programs, but I think it's very powerful to connect with somebody who maybe your interest is starting a small business and this person has experience. I should also say we send people to SCORE. I don't know whether you're familiar with SCORE.
SCORE is a great organization.
And they are wonderful in terms of supporting people starting a business. And often that's a much easier route than in terms of meaningful employment. Starting your own business is often a more productive route than maybe going to work for a fast food restaurant.
Absolutely. And that is actually something that that I've discussed in previous episodes also, that some of the barriers when you've been adjudicated are the fact that you may get a job offer and then they do a background check and it's like, oops, sorry.
And that's very hard.
Yeah, and demoralizing.
It is demoralizing, but this is an interesting example. One of the things I think we don't do enough with people in general is I don't think we celebrate or look at people when they succeed. Meaning that most of the people in our courts have had people any number of times say, let's analyze the 12 things you did wrong to get to the decision to use or violate the law. And yet, one of the things we point out is you get turned down for a job and you don't quit. Well, that's a success. And how did you manage the disappointment with that? What resources did you use to manage what did you tell yourself so that this didn't spin out of control?
Because it very easily could.
Exactly. And while, those situations are demoralizing and it's very easy to lose hope.
Pick yourself back up.
But I think that's part of the process of treatment courts, is to be able to look at successes, to look at times where people have been able to use coping skills, been able to use supports, and to celebrate those and figure out how you build on those to move forward. So unfortunately, our participants get a lot of practice in dealing with rejection, but hopefully in a way that they're supported and we help them move forward and find.
Yeah, and really a lot of that is lessons for life, right? Even if you have not been adjudicated, even if you have not been someone who has a substance abuse issue, we all need to learn those coping skills. So being able to sort of reprogram the negative voices that are in our heads when that negative voice comes in and says, oh, you're just not good enough. Being able to say, nope, stop, rewind the tape. I'm good enough. I'm going to go out there and try again. This job didn't work, but the next one will.
Right.
And that we all need to learn that, but even more so when you've been in a position where you've got a lot of barriers. As far as the mentors go, so some of these mentors could be somebody that is in a field that the person might have interest in.
Yes, or has an interest they might be interested in, whether it's arts or sports. But helping people figure out how they incorporate themselves in the community. Unfortunately, if you are surrounded by people who are also newly entering the community, that's not going to be the person who's going to suggest to you, well, maybe when you go up to somebody, you might want to say X, because the emphasis is on supporting you and sort of, I think, and appropriately so. But sometimes you need somebody to say, maybe another way to approach this was
right. Like it might work better for you if you get dressed up a little bit.
Or somebody to be able, we work with programs who do parenting classes. We certainly do that. But it's a little different if you don't have somebody to sit down with to say, I have this problem with my son and I did this and I feel bad that I said this. But to be able to talk, we all go to other people who assist us in the community with thinking things through. So to be able to talk to a person who's akin to a grandfather or a father about a decision or how I feel about this situation in that way, I think is really powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, in my estimation, a lot of the reason that people end up committing crimes is because they've probably suffered some trauma in their life. And having a mentor is a really helpful way to have that person be able to work through that trauma and regain trust.
The other thing is seeing people who maybe look like you or are like you in some way in positions that our society would label successful is also powerful.
Absolutely.
I remember years and years ago, and it stayed with me. I was on an airplane coming back from San Francisco, and I sat with an executive from Citibank who I guess his office was in Los Angeles. And he talked to me about the fact that they were involved in a mentor program with kids. And they would actually come to the executive's office, go up to the high rise and work on their homework. And to me, to be able to see somebody else in a position that maybe you didn't see yourself in. I mean, I became a lawyer because there was a woman in our town that I was introduced to who talked to me about it. I mean, I thought I was, going to in a very different direction, but it created that possibility in my mind.
Absolutely. Like, someone like me could do this.
Right.
This is a possibility.
Right.
And so that's a really good segue to the youth program that you have worked with. If you could talk a little bit about that.
We have something called the Youthful Offender Program, and it is for adult individuals or between the ages of 18 to 25. And that program, I started that program because of the following scenario. I also sat in juvenile court. So you might have two young people who went into a garage and stole alcohol. The 17-year-old, I can help make sure that child gets an education. I can work on any number of things with this child. And the 19-year-old, who may not have been the real
perpetrator, right?
Yeah, just along for the ride. My choices are either probation or jail. So they go to jail and they figure out they can manage jail. And they're also exposed to high-risk people who've been in the system. And probation doesn't really address their needs and also sends a message that this isn't really as significant as it is. So the DA's office agreed to do this. The individuals who come in are given a risk assessment. The agreement is that if they complete the program, then the district attorney's office will drop the felony. And conditions of the program, in addition to community service, may include, based on risk, getting your GED, getting a job. Some people I've sent to SCORE because as a young person starting a job. But for the males in the program, most of them, if they're able to, complete a 30-day program through Diacon in the central part of the state. And during that program, they have essentially an outward bound experience where the emphasis is on leadership and choice, working together, thinking about what it means to be a man, what that means for them in their lives. At the conclusion of that, they graduate, they're given a speech. They give a speech, and it's really moving. I went yesterday to hear what their thoughts are about what they want to do in life and what their choices have done to them in life. It's really amazing. And so then they come back and they're only sentenced on the misdemeanor. They no longer face having a felony conviction. So,
that's amazing. That's amazing. So they have gotten the decision-making skills. They are really learning a lot.
And I think that, the interesting thing too is DICON is a wonderful resource because DICON will offer scholarships for individuals who graduate from that program. And they also maintain contact with the participants who are in that program.
And that's the Outward Bound program.
Right. For lack of a better way to describe it, really is a very unique program. They actually go through different phases in the program. They hike the Appalachian Trail. Wow. They kayak, and they actually do a solo portion of the 30 days where they spend some time alone journaling. They certainly check on them
in the woods. By themselves. And they learn how to do that. That's a great opportunity.
And they're very different. I mean, we've had everything from somebody who was in a prestigious college to a young person who's a lot of criminally involved members of their family. So it's a very divergent group that comes together. And somehow they all learn and they come out feeling as though they are brothers in some way.
That's beautiful.
And a lot of them stay in contact with each other.
And we were talking a little bit about this beforehand, about the importance to be able to have this opportunity for women. And so because there are less women involved, other counties need to get together to create a
cohort. Would love that.
So the women out there.
Thank you. But the women we have in the program, we provide a case plan based on what their needs and strengths are. But we don't have the opportunity to do a program where a group would come together in that way because we don't have enough women in the program.
Where I know that we talked also about the fact that across the United States, the idea of recovery court and wellness court has been taking hold. What is something that listeners that are not in Bucks County or Philadelphia can do to help encourage this within their state?
I think in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court greatly encourages treatment courts of all kinds and veterans courts as well. And we have a veterans court in Bucks County. And nationwide, there's a great deal of support. But the strength, I really think the community, instead of advocating for these courts, I think there's a lot of, they're popping up everywhere. There's a great deal of support for this. What I think the community can do at large is to figure out how we as a community help people be incorporated in the community. The reality of this is there's a huge cost for addiction. There's a huge cost for mental health. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody says to me, well, it costs a lot for treatment, the true cost of somebody in being in the justice system for these issues is the cost of increased health care because they're not well, the cost of children being in placement, the cost of the crimes that are committed. And when you start looking at that versus the cost of a treatment court, the scale tips. And the reality is, unless the people that are in these courts are not people who are going to, even if they got a sentence within the aggravated range of the sentencing guidelines, they're not going away forever. So they are coming back to our communities. And so if we want them to succeed, if we want them not to commit another crime, we need to find ways to incorporate them into the communities. So, you have drug addicted people, I'm sure, on this street, in this town, on this street.
Everywhere.
We have people on this street, I'm sure, who have mental health issues. The only difference is if they are with us, is they are supported. People pay attention to what they're doing. And you are much safer to have somebody in one of our courts on the street with you than you are having somebody who's not receiving help and support. So for communities to understand that, we take very seriously our obligation of community protection. And I tell our participants, it's very serious about we don't know where you are in the community because we have an obligation to the community to protect the community.
Sure, because we chose to allow you to take treatment instead of being incarcerated.
Exactly. And so I think for communities, to the extent that people are able to provide meaningful employment to people, to be able to provide support, to work to decrease the stigma of having a mental illness in the community, whatever part we can do as part of the community to do that will help ensure the success of people being reincorporated in the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I appreciate how much work you've done to support the juveniles, to support people learning a different way. If they are going to be incarcerated, like you said, they're not going to get all that skills training. They're not going to get the help with the core problem. But if they are able to go to treatment,
right,
and they can treat those core problems, well, then hopefully they're going to be able to make different choices in their lives.
It's very interesting because I don't want to overstay my welcome, but one of the things, when the opioid crisis really started hitting, and I started a task force in the upper part of the county, and so I had a lot of contact with churches. And I think my question to the faith-based community is, do you believe in redemption? And if you do, what are you called upon to do?
That's an excellent question. I'm going to be speaking with some people in the faith-based communities, and I will ask them that. What are we all called upon to do if we believe in redemption? That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.